You know the music, you've seen the mania, but what if I told you the Beatles were almost cast in The Lord of the Rings? Or that their final song came out over 50 years after they broke up? From rooftop concerts the police tried to shut down, to Soviet bootlegs etched onto X-rays, and even a dream that became one of the most iconic ballads ever written. The Beatles' real story is stranger, deeper, and more revolutionary than you think. Welcome to the Mind Metrics, where we are taking a dive in to 30 mind-blowing facts about the Beatles that will change how you see music's most legendary band forever. Let's begin. Fact 1. The Beatles once held all top 5 spots on the Billboard Hot 100 simultaneously in an achievement that's never been repeated. On April 4th, 1964, the Beatles dominated the US music scene so completely that they held the entire top 5 of the Billboard Hot 100. The 5 songs were Can't Buy Me Love, Twist and Shout, She Loves You, I Wanna Hold Your Hand, and Please Please Me. This staggering success came at the height of Beatlemania, just months after their legendary appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show. No artist, not even Michael Jackson or Taylor Swift, has matched this historic chart sweep. Fact 2. They refused to perform for segregated audiences and changed their tour contracts to prove it. In 1964, when the Beatles planned to perform at the Gator Bowl in Jacksonville, Florida, they were informed the crowd would be racially segregated. The band immediately pushed back. George Harrison famously said, "We never played to segregated audiences, and we aren't going to start now." From that moment on, all of their American concert contracts included a clause demanding integrated seating, a bold stance during the height of the civil rights movement. Their commitment went beyond music. It was about using their global platform for social progress. Fact 3. John Lennon once claimed the Beatles were more popular than Jesus and sparked global outrage. In a 1966 interview with the London Evening Standard, John Lennon remarked, "Christianity will go. It will vanish and shrink. We're more popular than Jesus now." The quote was relatively unnoticed in the UK, but ignited massive controversy when republished in the US. Deeply religious regions burned Beatles records in protest. The band even received death threats. Lennon later clarified his statement, saying it wasn't a boast but a commentary on the decline of religious influence in modern life. Still, the backlash nearly derailed their American tour that year. Fact 4. The word love appears over 600 times in their lyrics. The Beatles' message of love wasn't just a theme, it was practically their philosophy. From All You Need Is Love to She Loves You, the word appears over 600 times in their officially released songs. It's their most used word outside of common pronouns and articles. Paul McCartney once said, "If you're going to write something down forever, it may as well be love." Fact 5. A conspiracy theory claimed Paul McCartney died in 1966 and was replaced by a lookalike. The Paul is dead theory exploded in 1969, fueled by bizarre clues fans believed were hidden in album art and lyrics. Supposedly, Paul died in a 1966 car crash and was secretly replaced by a double named Billy Shears. Fans pointed to things like the Abbey Road cover showing Paul barefoot like a corpse, John dressed in white like a preacher, "Turn Me On, Dead Man," when a track is played backwards. The band denied it, and Paul joked, "If I were dead, I'm sure I'd be the last to know." Fact 6. Ringo Starr wasn't the original drummer. Before Ringo, the band had Pete Best, who played with them during their formative years in Hamburg. Despite being with them through tough times, Best was suddenly dropped in 1962, just before they recorded with George Martin. His drumming didn't meet Martin's standards, and Ringo, who had occasionally subbed in, was chosen as the permanent replacement. Best's exit remains one of the most controversial decisions in the band's history. Fact 7. None of the Beatles could read sheet music. Despite composing some of the most innovative music in history, none of the Beatles were formally trained. They didn't read sheet music. Everything was written by ear or dictated to studio musicians. George Martin, their legendary producer, often transcribed their ideas into notation. Paul once said, It's like a mystery to us how we did it. Fact 8. Yesterday is one of the most covered songs of all time. Originally written by Paul McCartney in a dream, Yesterday has been recorded by more than 2,200 artists, from Elvis to Frank Sinatra to Boyz II Men. It holds the Guinness World Record for the most covered pop song ever. McCartney even double-checked with others to make sure he hadn't accidentally plagiarized it because it came to him too easily. Fact 9. The Beatles played over 1,200 shows before ever becoming famous. Before they were international icons, the Beatles cut their teeth in the gritty clubs of Hamburg, Germany. Between 1960 and 1962, they performed marathon sets, sometimes up to 8 hours a night, often fueled by coffee, sandwiches, and adrenaline. They played at strip clubs and back alley bars, slowly tightening their sound. Paul later said, "We got good in Hamburg, not Liverpool. We played until our fingers bled." Fact 10. George Harrison was only 14 when he joined the band. The Quiet Beatle was just 14 years old when Paul McCartney invited him to meet John Lennon. John hesitated, thinking George was too young. But after hearing him rip through a complex guitar solo on the bus, he was convinced. By 16, Harrison was playing full-time and became one of rock's most influential lead guitarists. Fact 11. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band changed album artwork forever. Released in 1967, Sgt. Pepper wasn't just a musical experiment. It was a visual revolution. The album cover featured a collage of 58 famous figures, including Einstein, Marilyn Monroe, and Carl Jung. Designed by artist Peter Blake, the cover was one of the first to treat albums as art objects, and it marked the beginning of the concept album era in rock. Fact 12. They invented the modern music video by accident. Tired of endlessly touring and appearing live on every TV show, the Beatles began filming short promotional films for their singles, including Paperback Writer and Rain in 1966. These clips were sent to broadcast networks worldwide and are now widely considered the first modern music videos, long before MTV existed. Fact 13. The Beatles stopped touring in 1966, at the peak of their fame. By August 1966, the Beatles had had enough of screaming fans, poor sound systems, and death threats. Their final public concert was held at Candlestick Park in San Francisco. After that, they became a studio-only band, focusing on experimentation instead of performance, leading to albums like Revolver and Sgt. Pepper's, which they couldn't have pulled off live anyway. Fact 14. Helter Skelter was blamed for a murder spree. Charles Manson interpreted lyrics from the Beatles' Helter Skelter as a call to ignite a race war. He believed the Beatles were sending him coded messages through the White Album. Tragically, this delusion contributed to the Manson family murders in 1969, a horrifying twist on what was originally a loud, chaotic rock song. Fact 15. Their rooftop concert was completely illegal. On January 30th, 1969, the Beatles gave their final live performance, unannounced, on the rooftop of Apple Corps in London. The lunchtime concert surprised commuters, brought traffic to a halt, and eventually drew the police, who threatened to shut it down. The whole scene was captured in the Let It Be documentary, and later, Peter Jackson's Get Back. Fact 16. Yoko Ono wasn't the reason the band broke up, not entirely. Though often blamed, Yoko Ono wasn't the sole cause of the Beatles' breakup. By 1968, all four members were creatively drifting apart. Business disagreements, ego clashes, and exhaustion played major roles. Still, Yoko's constant presence in the studio during tense sessions did add strain, especially for Paul and George. Fact 17, the Beatles were offered their own Lord of the Rings movie. Yes, this actually happened. In the 1960s, the Beatles approached filmmaker Stanley Kubrick with an idea to adapt The Lord of the Rings. They wanted Paul as Frodo, Ringo as Sam, George as Gandalf, and John as Gollum. Tolkien himself reportedly rejected the proposal, preventing what could have been the strangest adaptation of all time. Fact 18. George Harrison pioneered world music and Western pop. George was deeply inspired by Indian sitar master Ravi Shankar, whom he studied with in the mid-60s. His work brought instruments like the sitar into Western pop music, especially in songs like Within You, Without You. He's widely credited with introducing world music to a generation that had never heard it before. Fact 19. Paul McCartney composed Let It Be after dreaming about his mother. Paul's mother, Mary, died of cancer when he was just 14. Years later, during a time of intense stress, he dreamed she appeared and said, "It's going to be all right, just let it be." He woke up and wrote the song Let It Be, which became one of the band's most beloved anthems of comfort and peace. Fact 20. They recorded Revolution 9 as a sound experiment. The controversial track Revolution 9 was not a song, but a sound collage filled with loops, reverse tape, and spoken word. It was influenced by avant-garde artists like John Cage and Yoko Ono. Many fans hated it, but others called it groundbreaking, a precursor to experimental electronica decades ahead of its time. Fact 21. The Beatles wrote over 200 songs in just 8 years. Between 1962 and 1970, the Beatles released 213 original songs, nearly all of them self-written by Lennon, McCartney, Harrison, or rarely Starr. That's an average of 26 songs per year, including global hits that are still played daily over half a century later. Fact 22. I Want to Hold Your Hand was their U.S. breakthrough, thanks to a teenage girl. When a young fan named Marcia Albert from Washington, D.C. heard about the Beatles from British news coverage, she begged her local DJ to play their music. The DJ imported a copy of I Want to Hold Your Hand, aired it, and listeners went wild. The song soon exploded nationwide, launching the Beatles in America. Fact 23. Each Beatle had a solo #1 hit after the breakup. After the 1970 split, all 4 Beatles achieved solo success, with each of them landing at least one #1 hit. John Lennon with Just Like Starting Over, Paul McCartney with Coming Up, Silly Love Songs, George Harrison with My Sweet Lord, and Ringo Starr with Photograph. Fact 24. Their music was once banned in the USSR. During the Cold War, Western rock music was considered subversive. The Beatles were banned in Soviet Russia, forcing fans to copy their records onto discarded X-ray films, known as Bones records. These bootlegs circulated underground, and some credit them with inspiring the youth rebellion that helped weaken Soviet cultural control. Fact 25. Ringo coined the phrase "a hard day's night" by accident. After a long day of filming and performing, Ringo once said, "It's been a hard day's night." The other Beatles burst out laughing, and the phrase stuck. John quickly wrote a song around it, and the title became one of their biggest films and albums. Fact 26. The band met Elvis Presley, and it was incredibly awkward. In 1965, the Fab Four met the king of rock and roll at his home in Beverly Hills. But instead of a jam session, the meeting was filled with long silences and nervous laughter. Elvis mostly watched TV. Paul later said it was surreal and a bit disappointing, like meeting a legend who didn't know what to say either. Fact 27. George Harrison was the first Beatle to release a solo album. While many think of Lennon or McCartney as going solo first, it was actually George who released the experimental Wonderwall music in 1968, the soundtrack to a film. It was also the first solo album released on Apple Records. Fact 28. The band almost reunited in the 70s, but barely missed it. There were several near reunions in the 1970s, including one where Saturday Night Live's Lorne Michaels offered them $3,000 to perform live as a joke. Lennon and McCartney were watching it together and almost drove down to the studio, but ultimately decided not to. Fact 29. They used studio tricks that were revolutionary for their time. From reverse tape loops, double tracking vocals, automatic ADT, and artificial reverb, the Beatles and producer George Martin invented modern studio wizardry. Without these innovations, music production today would look very different. Fact 30. The Beatles' last song, Now and Then, was released in 2023. Thanks to AI-assisted technology and restored John Lennon demos, the Beatles released a final song, Now and Then, in 2023, more than 40 years after it was started. It brought all four voices together one last time and closed the book on a legacy that reshaped the world. From revolutionizing recording studios to rewriting pop culture, the Beatles weren't just a band, they were a global shift in sound, spirit, and society. Which fact blew your mind the most? Was it the banned Soviet records, the secret rooftop concert, or maybe Paul's dream that became a timeless hit? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear from every curious mind out there. And if you loved this deep dive into Beatles brilliance, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and smash that notification bell. Because here at the Mind Metrics, we turn hidden history into unforgettable insight. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. And like always, stay curious.